In the winter of 2011, 42-year-old Raghav took his family on a working vacation aboard a supply research vessel crossing the Northern Ocean and brought along his wife, Ananya, and their two children, 12-year-old Aryan and 8-year-old Sia. They expected a quiet, unique trip far from the noise of the city. The ocean is notoriously volatile. Within hours, the clear blue sky turned a bruised slate gray. A severe winter storm enveloped the vessel, generating massive swells. The ship violently buckled under the waves' pressure, throwing the passengers into chaos. When Raghav regained consciousness, the hum of the ship's engine was gone. He woke up to total silence, broken only by the sharp whistle of wind. The ship had been destroyed. His family was sitting on a thick sheet of ice, surrounded by scattered wreckage. Aryan's lips were already turning blue. The environment immediately dictated the stakes. They were stranded on an unnamed, frozen island. They had no communication equipment to signal for help, and no natural shelter. At these sub-zero temperatures, the human body cannot maintain its core heat, guaranteeing death by exposure within a matter of hours. Survival instantly shifted from an abstract concept to a brutal, ticking clock. Their immediate problem was the freezing air. To block the wind, Raghav scavenged whatever he could extract from the wreckage, pieces of wood, tin, and plastic, and dragged them through the snow to assemble a makeshift shelter. He pushed Ananya and the children inside as the sun set and the temperature plummeted further. They managed to salvage 2 tins of soup, a few biscuits, and a chocolate bar. But looking at this chart comparing mortality triggers, starvation takes weeks to kill. Severe hypothermia shuts down the body in mere hours. In extreme cold, biology forcefully prioritizes internal organs, pulling blood inward, leaving the extremities to freeze. Raghav realized that the lack of food was a distant secondary threat. The freezing air was actively killing them. By the 3rd day, the cold became agonizing. Sia was running a high fever, yet her hands and feet were like ice. Raghav dug through the frozen wreckage again, retrieving oil-soaked rags and torn electrical wire. Stripping the wire with numb, bleeding fingers, he sparked a small flame. Lighting that fire provided the physical, thermal energy they needed to survive the night, and the psychological momentum to face the next morning. The meager ship rations vanished quickly. To keep his family fed, Raghav caught fish beneath the ice and harvested meat from dead seals. He also established a strict daily protocol. Every single morning, he climbed to the highest elevation on the island, burned wood and oil to create thick smoke, and scanned the empty ocean for any sign of a rescue ship. The mental strain landed heavily on the children. 12-year-old Aryan quickly absorbed the responsibilities of an adult, learning to hunt and maintain the fire. 8-year-old Sia grew quiet, retreating inward to process her fear. By the end of their first year on the ice, the wait for rescue had become a secondary concern. They were operating as a hardened, self-sustaining survival unit. Once they secured a baseline of food and warmth, a new threat emerged: psychological decay. The sheer isolation of the island began to erode their mental stability. Ananya spent hours staring blankly at the snow, offering only exhausted smiles when spoken to. Sia eventually broke her silence only to ask if the outside world even remembered they existed. This mental fatigue collided with physical disaster in year 4. The island was hit by an unusually massive storm. The wind pressure violently shook their shelter until a structural wall buckled, sending an avalanche of snow pouring directly into their living space. The snow swept Aryan outward and completely buried him. Raghav sprinted outside into the blinding wind and began excavating the ice with his bare hands, tearing his skin open until he found his son's arm and dragged him to the surface. Pulling Aryan back into the shattered remnants of their shelter, Raghav held him tightly against his chest and openly wept. Surviving the avalanche required no scavenged tools or learned hunting techniques. They lived through that night simply through a stubborn refusal to let each other die. By the start of year 6, their physical margins were completely depleted. The seal and fish populations had dwindled. Sia had lost half her body weight, and Ananya rarely spoke. Raghav still climbed the peak every morning to light the signal fire, driven entirely by ingrained habit. On one particularly clear morning, Raghav noticed a small speck on the horizon. As it moved closer, the shape resolved into a boat. He threw every piece of wood he had onto the fire, waving frantically until the ship altered its course toward the island. When the crew finally reached the shore, the family collapsed. The doctors on the rescue ship wrapped their emaciated bodies in blankets, but the return to civilization revealed deep psychological scars. The family struggled with intense sensory overload from the sheer noise of the modern world. They jumped at small sounds and suffered from constant phantom chills. The frozen island acted as both a physical prison and a forge. It stripped away their health, subjected them to starvation, and forced them to the brink of psychological collapse. But it also welded their family bond into something unbreakable. They returned to the world because they anchored themselves to each other, maintaining the discipline to light a fire every single day, and simply outlasting the ice.